Welcome, my fellow Earthlings. My name is Rogan, and you are watching The Mysterious Stoner in a Bowler. And first, may I say Happy New Year. We have finally made it to 2021. And it has already been a crazy first week of the year. This particular episode, of this series is about the Bible. If you haven't been here before and you have no idea what is going on, this series is all about exposing the bullshit of the Bible. And beginning today, we are starting on the second book of the Old Testament, Exodus. The Exodus pertains and begins with the story of Israel leaving Egypt. And that is the story we are going to cover today and take for at face value and see what we can extract from it. So, without any further ado, let's begin. Now, at the end of Genesis, we had Joseph and his family move to Egypt. Well, he was there first, and I'm not going to get into that. You can watch my entire series on Genesis, but the Israelites started out as one family of an old man named Isaac, Jacob, yes, Jacob and his 12 sons. Jacob eventually renamed himself. I think he renamed himself, but the Bible says that God, or a random man that he ran into and wrestled with, named him Israel. So that is where the name Israelites came from. But he had 12 sons, and his 12 sons hated one of their brothers and sold him into Egypt. And long story short, that brother ended up doing a lot of good for Egypt, and the rest of his family ended up finding out about it, and they reunited, and things were great, and everything, and it was great, happy ending for everyone. But this story takes place generations later. The Israelites, the descendants of Jacob, or of Israel, have grown quite a lot. And there are so many now at this point that the Egyptians are becoming, or at least the Pharaoh, whoever that may be, we don't know, because the Bible does not say. And archaeologists still have no idea which Pharaoh it was, because there are no hieroglyphics that Egyptians have written in regards to this story. I will probably say that multiple times again throughout the next several episodes, but look it up for yourself. But the story begins here with lots of Israelites, and I will start in verse 8 of chapter 1. Now there arose a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph, the son who had been sold and eventually helped out Egypt. And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come, let us deal wisely with them. Let us multiply, lest they multiply. And it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies, and fight against us, and so get them up out of our land. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasured cities, Pithom and Ramses, supposedly. Now, there is an issue here, because, sure, okay, the Pharaoh did not know the origin of Israel, but I sort of doubt that, because the Egyptians were supposed to be pretty well known with their history. And kings are supposed to know the history of their countries before becoming kings. That's part of their education. That's part of the royal education of of kings. That's if you're gonna run a country, you need to know a lot of shit. You need to know mistakes from the past so that you don't repeat them, and such and so on. But somehow this Pharaoh doesn't know where these Israelites came from. But even if he had no way of knowing, they have been living here in Egypt amongst the Egyptians peacefully for a very, very long time. So, and the Pharaoh is concerned that the Israelites will join an enemy nation if it attacks. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. What reason does he have to think that the Israelites will do that? Why is it so often in the Bible it seems that people are always paranoid about the absolute worst in each other instead of the absolute best, and trying to make things better as opposed to worse for everyone? Instead of what Pharaoh does here, he thinks the solution is to make slaves out of Israel. Horrible idea. Fucking stupid. It makes no sense, because if the Israelites truly are more in number, if they had the backbone, which apparently they don't, they could have risen up against the Egyptians and fought them and won and taken over, but they didn't do that. I don't know why. Probably because they were not trained for military combat, which makes sense. They were probably, not interested in dying. But and in addition to that, the Egyptians were in fact known for being very good at military combat. They were very known for being deadly in hand-to-hand combat. So I suppose it makes sense to a degree why the Israelites would be afraid. But if they were that many more, perhaps they didn't know. I don't know. But it seems like the wiser thing to do would have been, instead of trying to make slaves out of them, which, sure, slaves are a lot of work to maintain and keep up with, especially a lot of them. But why not instead try and reinforce your relationship with them? Why not become even stronger allies? Why not do things to help them, to integrate them more into society, so that they are guaranteed to not join the enemies when they show up, so that they will fight with the Egyptians against the Egyptians' enemies? I don't know. This was a stupid Pharaoh, if he was a real Pharaoh, if he was a real person. But knowing the tendency of Abraham and his offspring, because they like to lie and make up stories and twist the truth a lot. Abraham was a scammer, and so were multiple of his descendants. It's quite possible this story could be complete bullshit, because there's really not enough evidence to support all of it. But anyways, let's continue on with the story. So the Pharaoh enslaves everyone. He has them start building cities. Uh, and I will have to look into that. Perhaps I will look into the building of those cities this week. Do some research on my own, and talk about it in the next episode. Um, because I forgot this was mentioned here, so that will be interesting to look into. But anyways, they were very, very harsh on the Israelites. And it really didn't seem to I don't know what Pharaoh expected of the Israelites to do, but like I don't know if he expected they would be too tired to have children to have sex at the end of the workday or whatever, but they continued having children and kept on growing and growing in numbers. And so Pharaoh came up with a new idea. He called in all the midwives who were responsible for helping Israelite women with their pregnancies. And he says to them, he tells them, when ye do the office of a midwife, as when you're doing your job to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools, I'm not quite sure what that part of the birthing process, I suppose. If it be a son, then ye shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then she shall live. So the Pharaoh was commanding to basically slowly kill off all of the Israelites. This was an extremely slow breeding out of the Israelite family. That was basically a massive, massive pack of cousins, all living together in Egypt. I never thought about that. This was a literal attempted genocide. That's crazy. Anyways, but anyways, the midwives refused to go along with it, which is pretty bold of them, considering the fact that they could be killed, executed. And it's funny because the king of Egypt calls for the midwives and says to them, "Why have ye done this thing and have saved the men children alive?" And the midwives said unto Pharaoh, "Because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively and are delivered ere the midwives come in unto them." So they're basically saying their excuse, their lie to Pharaoh, instead of saying, "Fuck you, this is a bad thing you're asking us to do, and we won't do it because it's wrong." Instead of saying that, they come up with this excuse saying that the Hebrew women give birth faster than Egyptian women. Okay. I think that's a stupid excuse. But and it's interesting because it then says, "Therefore God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mighty." So they just kept on being more children. And it came to pass, because the midwives feared God, that he made them houses. I never noticed that verse before. That's interesting. I'm not quite sure if he means literal houses or as in like got them married into wealthy families or had like large families. I don't know. I don't know what that means. I've never seen that before. Um, but apparently, God actually approved in this case of children not being killed. Well, because they were the Israelite children, of course. God's chosen people have a special exception. And so, I don't know why Pharaoh didn't just kill the midwives, because, that I think that would have sort of helped with his goal. I'm not trying to give the guy advice here, but if you're if the midwives aren't doing their job, and they're absolutely essential to having safe births, and you're trying to prevent safe births, or you, you would at least remove the help from the people who are having children that you don't want to have children. I don't know how God protected them. There's no story about God magically protecting them from Pharaoh or anything like that. It just says he dealt well with them. Okay, whatever. And made them houses, whatever that means. We just have to take God's word for it, that Pharaoh didn't straight up kill the midwives. But, of course, Pharaoh was not going to be deterred by midwives. And so he charged his own, it says his people, but I'm going to assume it was his troops, hopefully. It would be weird if it were like his citizens, but I'm sure it was probably just the soldiers. But it says, Pharaoh charged his people, saying, every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive. So the killing happened anyways. Pharaoh sent his troops out, and they went off and killed all the newborn children that were being born. And I don't know how that didn't work out to where they weren't successful, because apparently they weren't very thorough or something. I don't know. But of course, people still they still went against what Pharaoh wanted. They tried to hide their children. There was probably, I imagine there was an age limit they went with. Probably like 2 years old or something like that. Trying to make sure there were no more boys being born to keep the Israelite lines going. Family lines. And it makes me wonder, with all the people that they had, if they continued having more and more people, the Israelites that is, that, even if they didn't want to rise up against Pharaoh, what could Pharaoh and his armies do if they just left on their own and said, what, we don't want to live here anymore. We are going to be our own nation somewhere else. We're not going to be slaves for you guys. There's more of us than there are of you. Go ahead, try and stop us. We will swarm you, and you. If they had just done that, they could have been free a lot sooner. But of course, they didn't do that. They stayed, remained slaves, and lots of babies, well, in this story, probably died over an extensive amount of time. I don't know how long Pharaoh kept on doing this. Maybe he did it for a time. I don't know. It doesn't say if he ever let up on this rule. And I would think, given the story of Moses, when Moses returns to, tell Pharaoh to let my people go and all that, I would think there wouldn't be any more boys. There would be girls and maybe young women, but if Pharaoh had continued to be thorough in killing the boys being born, there wouldn't be any boy children when the Israelites left Egypt. Which means they all had to marry older men at some point, or wait, or stay single their whole lives, or wait till new baby boys were born and got old enough for them to marry, but by then they would be, significantly older. Well, they were into marrying very young girls off to older men back then, so I'm sure it wasn't too big of an issue for the men back then. But let's continue. So, baby boys are being killed left and right by the Egyptian soldiers. And oh, by the way, God isn't doing jack shit about it. He's just letting that happen. He's blessing the midwives who wouldn't kill the babies, but he's not protecting the Israelites who are losing. Oh, well, okay. He protects one. This guy gets married sometime during this whole shit show, and has some children, and eventually has a son. And they do their best to hide him for as long as they can, but eventually he gets too big, and it's too much of a risk to keep him around, so they put him in a waterproof basket, and they put him in the river, and let him go, and pray that, God does something with him. Now, I wonder if things would have been any different if anyone else, any other mother, had done the same thing for their male children. Would God have done something special for their children as well, like what happened with Moses coming up? Or would they have been eaten by crocodiles or the hippopotamuses, or been found by Egyptian soldiers? Why was only Moses protected and preserved? Why couldn't God preserve all the male children of the Israelites? Why couldn't God have warned the Israelites that this was coming and tell them, hey, the Pharaoh is not liking you, he's afraid of you, and he's going to turn you all into slaves if you don't leave. So leave. Great. I mean, you stay and you keep having children at the rate that you are. He's going to start killing your children. I know it because I'm God, and I know everything ahead of time. At least that's what Christians say, that he knows everything. So he knew this was going to happen, and he let it happen anyways. Although we'll come back to that, because there's more to say about that. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her handmaidens were walking along the river's edge, and they saw the basket, and they brought it in, and the princess saw the baby and was like, "Oh, I want it," and that's pretty much, well, okay. That wasn't quite the end. This baby boy, she named him Moses because Moses means drawn out of the river. And this little baby boy's older sister was watching him from a distance. And when she saw the Pharaoh's princess come to, when saw her get the baby, she stepped forward and said, I know this lady who was pregnant recently, and she's still she's still giving milk. So if you want, she could be like a midwife for the baby. She was talking about her own mother, of course. And so they worked something out, and Moses was eventually adopted and raised in the palace as like a prince of Egypt. I have seen that movie. That it's not completely accurate, and neither is the Ten Commandments movie. Although I think it might be a little bit more accurate. I haven't seen it in a very long time. I wouldn't mind seeing it again, but maybe someday. And so Moses grows up in the palace, and he is aware that it strikes me that it seems like he might be aware that he is Hebrew. He's not Egyptian. He probably looks a little bit different from them. Maybe. But, he walks, talks like them, dresses like them. He's pretty, he's probably kind of conflicted about it. But he's an adult now, so there's probably not any baby boys left by now. Couldn't be. Doesn't say that God was saving them, but anyways. Sorry, God just doesn't. He's a. I don't like him. And so Moses finds this Egyptian beating a Hebrew. And he looks this way and that way, and he kills the Egyptian and lets the Hebrew escape. and then it's kind of funny later on. He's walking around later, and there's two Hebrews fighting. And so he goes to them, he's trying to resolve the issue. And he says he asks the guy who was in the wrong, he asks, why are you hitting your brother? And the guy says, who made you a judge over us? And then he flips out. Moses flips out. I need to stop smoking this. Moses is terrified because now people know. Although I imagine, that's what would happen when you let the Hebrew go that you saved. Even if no one else was watching, that guy is going to tell someone. That someone is going to tell someone else. And the word is going to eventually get around. And eventually Pharaoh finds out, and he tries to kill Moses. But Moses escapes, runs for his life, and ends up somewhere out in some place called Midian, I believe. Yes, the land of Midian. And he comes near to where this individual known as the priest of Midian. I'm looking for his name. Where is it? There it is, Raoul. It's not Raoul, it's Raoul. R-E-U-E-L. Interesting name. But this guy owns some flocks and sheep. Oh, we're familiar with those. He's a rich guy. And he's got 7 daughters, and they're watching over some of his flocks, and they're out by a well. And Moses comes across a well, and there's some guys giving them some trouble, so Moses, he probably knew some Egyptian martial arts. He scared them off, and of course, Reuel, the priest of Midian, I don't know why who he's a priest for. It doesn't actually say. I think we're just meant to assume it's God that he's a priest for, although I don't know what qualifies him as a priest at all, because nothing is said about it. He's just the priest of Midian. So, okay. And Moses falls in love with one of his 7 daughters, and they get married, and Moses stays there, and he is having a pretty decent life for not being a prince anymore. And I don't know if he is, but he's seemingly content where he is. And then it says, at the end of chapter 2, it came to pass in process of time that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed by reason of the bondage, and they cried, and their cry came up unto God by reason of the bondage. And God heard their cry, heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And God looked upon the children of Israel, and God had respect unto them. Look, this Pharaoh orders all these Hebrew babies to die. And then, then the whole thing with Moses happens. He gets put into the river. He gets adopted by the princess. He gets to live with his mother for a little bit, but ends up, going and being raised fully then in the palace. That's all great and everything. But then this Pharaoh who's been killing Hebrew babies in the meantime, nothing happens to him. It just says, it came to pass in the process of time that the king of Egypt died. That's it. God didn't strike him dead for murdering his chosen people. He didn't do anything. He didn't warn him. There is nothing significant about this king's death. It wasn't said that the king cried out in torment as he died, burning in hell. Nothing. Didn't say anything about being dragged away by demons and wishing he had killed the children of God. Nothing. Nothing. Fuck the babies. That's what God said. And oh, that guy died? Oh, I didn't even realize he died. Oh, my children are crying for my help. Maybe I should do something. Hmm. Maybe I should do something. Oh, they're suffering so terribly. I should, yes, I know, I respect what they're going through. I should really do something. I think I'm gonna show off. A little bit of a spoiler alert. He really does. You've heard of the 10 plagues? Yeah, we're gonna go through that. We're gonna have fun with that too. And it's not even the same pharaoh that killed all these babies. No, no. This other pharaoh that inherited all this shit gets to deal with the plagues. Sure, he kind of inherited the attitude too. He could have been nicer to them. I'm sure he deserves some of it, but really, his dad or his predecessor, anyways, it's like his predecessor completely got away with it. God didn't do anything in revenge. He did nothing for the children of Israel. He patted the midwives on the back for not killing the baby boys. And then he let the Egyptians come right in and kill all the other babies, except for Moses. But, let them do their job. Keep on doing that. What the fuck kind of a monster is this God? Mysterious ways, my ass. His mysterious ways involve murdering his own chosen people's babies. Do I have that right? That's part of his grand scheme to murder children? Okay. And he's supposed to be a benevolent, all-loving, all-caring God. I understand this is the more violent version of God. But holy shit, couldn't he have just been violent to the Egyptians? Couldn't he have just been... Why did he... if he's supposed to know everything before it happens, why couldn't he have done something to prevent this, to tell the Israelites to leave? I probably already said that. I don't know. This is such... God has no sense of fucking logic. If he is all-knowing, all-wise, and if every life is precious to God, the way Christians like to say it is, well, God had no problem with the Egyptians aborting tons of Hebrew babies. He didn't do anything about it. He didn't do anything to the Pharaoh that ordered it to happen. And I doubt there were any... Like, I don't know how old these men were that Moses interacted with, but they probably weren't his age. And like, if the killing kept on happening, like, how did it not infuriate the Israelites to strike back against the Egyptians? Like, I don't care how good of a fighter you are. If you are trying to kill my son, I am going to try and kill you to defend him. Okay? And even if, even if it wasn't my son, it isn't right. It shouldn't be going around happening. But the Israelites just let it happen. They didn't try. They didn't like form up and like try and fight back. They just like, oh, we can't do anything. Just come and kill. We won't. We'll just take it. They did absolutely nothing. Really? Really? These are weak-boned people. They are spineless. They have no backbone to just let it happen. They didn't leave. They didn't fight back. They just stayed. They just stayed. They and God did nothing. God seemingly forgot. And that's what a wonderful God Yahweh is. That concludes our Bible story for this evening. You see the gold lettering on here? And all the brown. It's a fancy book, but funny enough, the gold reminds me of how little good there is in this book. And all the surrounding brown, it reminds me of the color of shit, which I believe is what this book most consists of. Utter bullshit. So, if you have any questions or anything, any thoughts or comments, please leave them down below. Like, subscribe, and share. If you haven't, let other people know that this book is not worth knowing. Well, it's worth knowing if you want to know how to not live. Because there is a lot of bad examples in this book. It's interesting to read, but it is not good for basing your life on. It's got a few good suggestions and some good ideas, but really, a few. We'll find them as we go along, but we're sorting through and wading through all the shit along the way, and I hope you're having as much fun as I am doing this. I did not imagine I would enjoy this as much as I am. But I hope you will come back next week. And hopefully this next week of 2021 will be much more peaceful and much calmer. Stay safe, my friends. Don't go to any riots, alright? Stay home. Stay safe. And until next time, my friends, farewell.